The Daily Hail chants it, trumpets it, blasts it from the masthead. The headline: Brexit plan to end mass migration from EU. There's Chucky Mark actually showing the headline from the paper. Chucky Mark, artist, taxi driver. That's what it's about, isn't it? It's what it's always been about. Absolute racism. Let me show you another. Let me read you something else from this book. It's a fantastic book if you get a chance to read it, okay? I'm about 3/4 of the way through. I keep dipping in and dipping out. But it is called Those Were the Days, the Holocaust as Seen by Perpetrators and Bystanders. Let me read you what a bystander said of an action carried out in carried out in January 1942, and it was reported on by Gerhard Ellen. His report reads: I was holding a whip or a pistol. I was loading and unloading. The men, children and mothers were pushed into the pit. Children were first beaten to death and then thrown feet first into the pits. There were a number of filthy sadists in the extermination commando. For example, pregnant women were shot in the belly for fun and then thrown into the pits. Before the execution, the Jews had to undergo a body search, during which anuses and sex organs were searched for valuables and jewels. That quote is by Alfred Metzger, driver and interpreter. The title of this particular chapter, number 2 in this section, says from an official that the action rid me of unnecessary mouths to feed. The action rid me of unnecessary mouths to feed. Just tell me this. How many people are proclaiming constantly all these migrants, all these unnecessary mouths to feed, all these migrants leeching off our social security, all these migrants leeching off our welfare, our housing, all these unnecessary mouths to feed. That's what it's about, isn't it? The whole BREXIT thing, as he calls it, because it is BREXIT, it's always been about race. It's always been about migration. He goes on in that video, and I'll amplify it too, to mention a Channel 4 presenter who was out walking down the street somewhere or other, and about a 12-year-old kid says to them, "Go home, Packy. Go home, Packy." Let me just point out a personal thing. 1970s, about 72, 73. I would have been between, about the same age as that kid actually, probably between about 11 and 12. We just returned from a tour in Malta. If you look back into the background there, that's the Para's shield, parachute regiment, 3 Para, given to my dad by 3 Para as we were serving over there, or he was serving over there. We were out with him as a family, and he was serving over there in the Royal Army Ordnance Corps, and we returned to Chilwell. Now you can see I'm actually quite dark. Yep, I'm actually quite dark. The numbers of times it was yelled at me, "Go home, Packy. We don't want Packies over here. Your old man's a bus conductor. All Packies are the children of bus conductors. I was bullied, abused, racist comments. They were constant. We had to deal with it, obviously, through the school. In fact, there was an advert on at the time for Cadbury's drinking chocolate, and I managed, somehow or another, to be put in the choir at school, the staff choir, and because the advert had a little theme to it, that was a little theme song that said, "Cup hands, here comes Cadbury's, cup hands, here comes Cadbury's," they used to go, "Cup hands, here comes Linford." Subtle, but racist. Racist abuse. And what's Brexit all about? Racism. Naked racism. And of course it brings it to the fore now, doesn't it? It makes it quite acceptable. In fact, as Chucky Mark says, people are even saying, I would rather lose my job. I would rather lose my income. I would rather lose my house, my security, and my education than take any more, and look at the lovely neutral term here, any more migrants. Migrants. Yeah? Think about that. It's now going to be more race hate, more violence. Think about Grenfell. It's all going to be acceptable now that we're getting out of the EU and we're stopping the migrants. Look at the race hate. Look how the attacks will increase. I'm ashamed to be part of this country. I am literally ashamed. That you see there is just an extension of the account that I read from this book. No more mouths to feed. Remember that quote? The action, rid me of mouths to feed. Scary, isn't it? That's what you're all about, isn't it, Tories? 1 million racists to the fore. They got all they need now, haven't they? 1 million racists. And more. 1 million racists who will be voting Tory. You bet. Scary. Or what? What do you think? Brexit. It's always been about racism. Always will be. There we have it. Depressing, I know, but sometimes you have to be depressed to stand up and fight. That's what I'm doing anyway.